Welcome to the Explainer. Look, today we are going to completely tear down the conventional wisdom around preparing for the CAT exam. If you're a software engineer juggling a crazy demanding full-time job while eyeing CAT 2026, this tactical breakdown is built entirely for you. We're going to unpack exactly how this is done, and more importantly, we're going to completely replace that intimidating, you absolutely must study 8 hours a day myth with a realistic, high-impact approach that actually fits into a busy developer's life. Because, spoiler alert, you really don't need to quit your job to get a 99th percentile score. By the end of our time together today, you'll see the exact mechanics of how working professionals are pulling this off year after year.
But first, let's just address the elephant in the room right away. Can you realistically prepare for one of the toughest exams in the country while working full-time? As an engineer, your day probably looks a little something like this: a 10 a.m. stand-up, a grueling sprint review at 3 p.m., and just as you're about to log off, boom, a 6 p.m. production bug that just needs a quick fix but entirely ruins your evening. It is exhausting. Finding the mental energy to study after staring at code all day is a massive challenge. So if you're feeling anxious about finding the time to prep, your concern is completely valid. It's a real grind.
Okay, let's dive into this. On one side, you've got the full-time CAT aspirant, casually dropping 6 to 8 hours a day into their prep. Then on the other side, we have you, the working engineer, realistically squeezing in maybe 1 to 2 focused hours on a weekday. It looks like a huge mismatch, right? Almost unfair. But here is the massive reality check we discovered in the data. Thousands of working professionals score in the 99th percentile every single year with this exact constraint. The secret? It isn't about finding more time, it's about radically changing how you use the time you actually have.
To get you there, we've structured this explainer kind of like technical documentation: systematic, step-by-step, and zero fluff. We're hitting 1, the full-time reality; 2, the engineer's hidden edge; 3, your weekly prep schedule; 4, handling sprints and on-call; 5, prioritizing and mocks; and finally, 6, common mistakes to avoid. Section 1, the full-time reality. Because you simply don't have the luxury of endless study blocks, your time management, mental fatigue, and your consistency are going to dictate your success way more than sheer volume ever could.
Section 2, the engineer's hidden edge. Let's flip the script a bit and see how your day job actually gives you a massive head start in one very specific area.
That area is DILR, or Data Interpretation and Logical Reasoning. Think of these sets as essentially structured puzzles with rigid constraints. If you spend your days writing complex SQL queries, fetching and organizing data from APIs, or debugging convoluted logic loops, well, DILR is going to feel surprisingly close to home. You already think in conditions and patterns. The blueprint here suggests leaning hard into this natural strength early on, instead of avoiding it. This is your built-in competitive advantage. However, the flip side of that coin is VARC, verbal ability and reading comprehension. While DILR aligns beautifully with your coding skills, VARC is going to require some deliberate, uncomfortable effort. Why? Because it involves incredibly dense reading comprehension in subjects like economics, sociology, and philosophy. Look, unless you have some very unique weekend hobbies, these topics simply do not naturally occur in your day-to-day tech job. You're going to have to intentionally carve out time to train your brain to read and comprehend this kind of non-technical humanities text. Section 3, your weekly prep schedule. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it introduces a highly optimized 12 to 15 hour per week tactical system. Think of the schedule as the actual engine of your prep. Let's break it down. On weekdays, you're aiming for just 1 to 2 hours, ideally early in the morning before those Slack notifications completely fry your brain. Just focus on one topic and one section. Then, utilize your lunch break. Take just 20 to 30 minutes to knock out 10 to 15 practice questions. That adds up to a staggering amount of practice over a few months. Commuting? Use that dead time for vocabulary flashcards or audio revision. Finally, your weekends are the heavy lifters. Saturday is 3 to 4 hours dedicated solely to a full mock test and deep analysis. Sunday, another 3 to 4 hours for revision and drilling into your weak areas. It's a highly consistent, winning routine that genuinely respects your 9 to 5. Section 4, handling sprints and on-call. Let's be real. We need to talk about navigating those messy, unpredictable release weeks and on-call rotations that will inevitably try to ruin your perfect schedule. So when the crunch weeks hit, and they will, you need to run this 2-step protocol. Step 1, protect at least one mock test. Even if the week is a total disaster and AWS is completely down, get a shorter sectional mock done. Just keep that testing muscle active. Step 2, build in one buffer day every 2 weeks with absolutely zero study expectations. Planning for these anomalies is crucial because it prevents those dreaded guilt spirals. When you miss a day due to an on-call emergency, having a buffer day means your overall plan is still perfectly on track. You avoid burnout and you keep your momentum alive. Section 5. Prioritizing and mocks. We really need to zoom in on exactly what to execute during those limited study hours to actually move the needle before exam day. These right here are your high-impact priority targets. For quantitative ability, zero in on arithmetic, algebra, and geometry. These show up constantly, and they heavily reward practice over raw theory. For Varsity, prioritize reading those dense passages we talked about, and keep grammar review strictly to the basics. For DILR, drill your puzzles, your arrangements, and chart-based data to leverage those logic skills. You have to remember, CAT does not reward scattered end-to-end syllabus coverage. It heavily rewards speed and accuracy in these specific high-frequency areas. And this brilliantly illustrates our next major point, coming straight from professionals who have actually pulled this off. Taking multiple mock tests and analyzing them was my biggest growth lever. Theory is fine, but mocks are the absolute non-negotiable necessity of your preparation.
Notice the ramp-up strategy here? At the start of your prep, doing 1 mock per week is plenty. But as you get closer to the exam, you've got to scale that up to 2 or 3 mocks per week. Mocks are the only realistic simulation of doing high-focus work when your brain is already exhausted, which is exactly how you're going to feel on test day. But here's the golden rule, so pay attention. The actual mock test isn't where the learning happens. The real magic happens during the analysis phase. You need to spend just as much time analyzing the mock as you did taking it. You need to identify, was this mistake a concept gap, a silly error, or a terrible misallocation of time? Section 6, Common Mistakes to Avoid. Consider this your definitive troubleshooting guide to bypass the classic traps that derail working professionals. Let's quickly run through these red flags. First, overreading theory. Look, reading software documentation might be a passive activity, but CAT requires active, aggressive practice. Stop reading, start solving. Second, studying without a plan. Actually, scratch that, studying without a weekly plan. That leads straight to burnout. Stick to the system. Third, skipping mock analysis. Doing this literally just means you're practicing your mistakes faster. Fourth, letting your work quality drop. Poor performance at your day job creates stress that bleeds right into your study time, so keep those boundaries incredibly strict. And lastly, never ever compare your study hours to full-time aspirants. Your constraints are different, your strategy is different, and tracking your own week-over-week progress is the only metric that truly matters. At the end of the day, consistency is always going to beat sheer volume. You don't need 8 hours a day, you just need a resilient plan and the absolute discipline to execute it, even when your sprints get messy. So, as we wrap up this explainer, the biggest takeaway from this blueprint is really a question for you. What is your biggest CAT prep challenge while working full-time? Identify it, strategize around it, and let that drive your optimization as you gear up for 2026. Keep analyzing, keep pushing, and you will be well on your way to cracking it.